So we will get started with this week's event for the Drill Art Times Money, which is a 5-part series looking at which is more focused around the financial side, around being an artist and finances as well. And we're really happy to be hosting our special guest today, Hakeem Adedeji, who we will introduce formally in a few moments. But before we get into today's event, I just wanted to welcome all of our participants who are attending on Zoom and all of our participants who are attending this event via YouTube as well. We really appreciate your attendance and for you being with us on what is a sunny day here in the UK. I'm not sure about everywhere else. I know there's people attending from all over the world, but we do appreciate you taking the time out of your day taking the time out of your day in your afternoon or evening or morning to be with us today. Just wanted to let you know a few housekeeping rules. If possible, whilst the presentations are on, if you could keep your cameras off and your mics muted. One of the reasons why we advise keeping your cameras off for those who are attending on Zoom is just so that we can cater to the different bandwidths, from all of our attendees, should I say. In terms of mics, it just allows us to focus on the speakers, but we will have a Q&A section at some point towards the end of this event where you'll be able to unmute your mic and turn your camera on as well. As I've mentioned, this event is being streamed on YouTube as well, so if you do turn on your mic during the Q&A section, you will be streamed on YouTube. So just to let you know, if you're not comfortable with being seen on camera, you can ask your question or give your feedback with your mic switched off as well. And another thing just to point out, which I've already mentioned, is that there'll be a Q&A towards the end of this event. And so do keep your questions. If you do have any in mind, you can start to place your questions in the chat for those who are attending on Zoom, and for those who are streaming through YouTube, you'll be able to place your question in the comments as well. I'd like to give a massive thank you to Format International Photography Festival and Quad Derby, who have been supporting this event. We have Louise Fedotov-Clements, who is the Artistic Director for Format Festival, the Director of Format Festival and the Artistic Director of Quad Derby, in attendance with us today. So thank you so much to them for their support. Without further ado, we'll get on with today's event. I'd like to pass over to Innocent, who will be introducing our speaker and who will be in conversation with them as well. So thanks again for tuning in today and enjoy the event.
Hi, thanks again. Thank you, Sir. Thanks, everyone. Thanks everyone for joining us, and today is the second session of the Drill Art and Money, and we have our guest today. Our facilitator today is Hakeem Adedeji, the CEO of Hydrocarbon Advisors. He is an investment banker, a photographer, and avid collector, who for some reason, anyway, I'll say that for later. He's joining us today from Lagos, and our conversation today is basically focused on the financial sector in a sense, and how it relates with art and how it influences the artists and the art market generally. And Hakeem Adedeji has over 30 years experience as an investment banker, so we will be sure to have any question you have, just question you have in regards to investments as an artist and how you can safely get into that, you could just pop it into the chat. And then, I'll go straight into it. Thank you, sir, for joining us today. Finally, we get to have this conversation live. We're having a lot of conversation on the back end, a lot of phone calls, a lot of chats back and forth. And I'm really glad we finally get to have this conversation, and everyone gets to join us in this conversation today. So I think it's best to just get into it, and let's start with talking about. Oh, pardon me. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to the introduction I did of you. I should have let you speak about that. If you want to introduce yourself beyond how I have, do you?
Not really, except for the fact that beyond being a collector, I'm also a patron because I do a lot of activities within the art world. For example, we're just about to start a new residency outside of Lagos, which I think I've discussed with you in the past. And we also provide a lot of support I also provide a lot of support. And sometimes I bring the company along to provide support for the artists in their practice. That's all.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much, sir. So, so I want to go into discussing the economy of the visual arts in Nigeria as opposed to and in comparison to Africa and the rest of the world. And I'm curious, like talking about, because the conversation is all about art and money, the relationship between art and money, and one would want to know exactly how this particular market space, this relationship, what it's like what exactly is the economics of art in Nigeria and Africa, and how does it play?
So have you finished? Not sure if I lost
Yes,
you.
I have finished. How does it play out? Yeah.
Okay, sure. So before I describe what I understand to be the Nigerian or African market, I think it's important to just try and define, or rather try and identify the main factors within the global art economy. So art economy, as far as I can see, has quite a lot of participation, quite a lot of stakeholders, a lot of whom are called the gatekeepers. Last check, I think it was, and depending on whose record you're using, whose data you're using, it was anything between $50 and $60 billion industry. That's no mean feat, or rather, that's a very big industry, and I think what I usually say to people is that regardless of what you think about art, the subjective nature of art, if you see that industry as a proper industry, the same way as you see the drinks industry, or the same way as you see the oil and gas industry, then you wouldn't be too far from wrong. And in a lot of cases, a lot of the business principles would have to apply, or do apply actually. Now, coming back to the African art or the Nigerian art, and I'll say, let me just be specific here, the visual, art market. I think it's a market which consists of fewer than, the stakeholders that you see. So basically, it's based on, gallery owners, dealers. You do have the collectors, and of course, you have the artists. And now, I think the market is starting to see the curators and the consultants, and even importantly, the people who actually write about the industry, who document the industry. So in terms of the size, I don't know exactly if a specific data exists, but if you judge this market by what happens in the auction markets globally, maybe the auction markets in London, maybe the auction markets in Nigeria, the worth of the Nigerian industry, as far as auctions are concerned, may not even be more than perhaps 5 to 10 million, if that, per annum. However, what characterizes that market is the fact that a lot of the deals that you would ordinarily include in the data is actually done privately. I would say, and I don't have data on this, I would say anything between 50 and 70% of the exchanges actually happen, on a private level. Innocent?
Yeah, I can hear you now. I think I lost you for a second.
Okay. So in terms of the activities that you find, I think we're still at the basal level. That it's things are very basic. So you do have the artists who create the works. You have the buyers who actually, I believe, are the collectors are a bigger market than the galleries. Then you have the collectors, and you also have the art dealers as well as the galleries, who all compete, or rather who all buy and sell the works of the artist. Now, compared to the Western economies, things like museums as institutions, as well as residencies, as well as the curatorial hub, they are not that present. So, and I believe this is what has kept this market, very small. But then when you compare what is happening now, the kind of numbers that I just mentioned, 5 to 10 million, versus what happened 10 years ago, or perhaps 20 years ago, there has been a big movement. There has been an improvement in the size of the market. There has been a huge, influx of different players of one type or the other playing. You have more galleries, you have a lot more collectors, you have a lot more dealers, and a lot more people are going into art as a profession. I'm going to stop there. I'm not sure if that addresses your question, but I'm willing to take further sort of question, request for clarification.
Thank you. That kind of describes exactly what we have on ground, I think, which is quite useful. And I know you already started mentioning some of these other things, but what are the key factors that influence the growth of the economy? I mean, you stated how much the economy is, the size of the markets globally, and what is happening in the private and in the public scenes, but rather in the private corners and in the other spaces. But what other key factors are there that can influence the growth of the economy, either that is currently not present in the Nigerian and African art space, or that is just beginning to come up in the art space? And also, this is maybe, as you've noticed, like you said, in the last 20 years, there seems to have been some growth in the African art market. So what are the things we are doing well? What are these factors that we need to improve on, and what else should come in?
For a start, I think, okay, so if I were to look back to perhaps 30 years ago or 35 years ago, people didn't go into art because they wanted to. A lot more people went into art because they felt that, they needed to, and they needed to actualize. But you now have a lot more people going into art because of interest, because they actually do believe that they can make a living from it. So first and foremost, there's a big rise in the number of artists in the industry. There's also a big rise in the number of galleries and other players in the industry. Now, because of the prosperity that Africa has seen in the last perhaps 30 years, a lot more collectors are coming in. They are seeing art as first and foremost, we can't deny it, as a store of value. And because of their new prosperity, people are also seeing art as something to enjoy. I think those two factors, the fact that the players are many, has actually contributed to growth in the economy. Now, if you do talk about the other factors, the fact that there are foreign interests in the art, in, let's say, visual art, there are new buyers from outside of the continent because there is interest in that profession and in the works, the works of art outside of Africa has also elevated, even though, has actually elevated the presence of African art, even though I still believe that there are more acquirers, there are more collectors on the continent than there are outside. So we actually make our own fortunes internally. I think in some markets, perhaps in South Africa, you do find that the finance market has actually boosted, the presence and the importance of art, in the sense that a lot more financing is actually going on in art than you will find in a place like Nigeria. But then Nigeria is also not behind, and neither is Ghana, and the other big markets like Senegal, Kenya as well.
Thank you. So, considering like the strength, like you said, and considering this current growth and this spur of growth we are witnessing, so why does it seem like countries, art organizations and institutions and cultural institutions are considered unprofitable and mere charities? Like, I've had conversations with a couple of friends in the tech world, even in finance sector, who the first thing that came out of their mind was like, oh, art is a charity, or it's not transactional enough. So why are they having this outlook to it when apparently it is a big deal in the global market? It's bringing in so much revenue.
I think the way you organize a market actually matters. The way you trap the value within the market. So if you go to the West, if you go to the London market, for example, there is a proper mapping of that market. Artists are artists. They don't do much else apart from, create. And their works are, displayed and marketed by galleries and art dealers. What you will find in this market, I'm just going straight to some of the points some of the observations that I've made in the last 30 years or 35, 36 years of collecting. You will find that it's not so organized, even in its present more advanced stage than 20 years ago or even 10 years ago. And the professions are not that well defined. So an artist creating work may actually be left having to sell his own works, having to market his own works. The result of that might well be that he's not able to get the market value for it. And then he's not able to increase his prosperity. If you look at what happens in this market, where a work that is selling for about $1,000, and that was considered big money a few years ago, goes out into the London market or the auction market and starts fetching $5,000, $10,000. Okay. Now, what I see is that the prosperity of the market, of the different practitioners, is enhanced when you have a much more organized market. And that we are only just seeing in the Nigerian or the African market. Maybe the South African market is a lot more advanced. They got there before us in terms of organization. But then we're only just starting to see that in places like Nigeria and Ghana. The right people just have to fill the right spaces and the right jobs. We don't see much of that now.
Interesting. So in that regards, right, if as is, like as basically what we have right now, I sense that we have to basically build our own path to the future, like filling the right spaces, like you said, and probably also rethink some of the practices we've been used to in our systems, especially in the relationship between these arts institutions and the financial institutions. What new financial models are worth considering for arts institutions and cultural organizations?
I think, quite honestly, I think what we have seen in the last perhaps 5 years, if you go around Lagos, if you went around Lagos 10 years ago, you would not find as many art galleries as you do find today. Especially in the last perhaps 2-3 years, a lot more galleries have sprung up. And it's because new capital is entering that industry. New investors have been persuaded to see art as an investment vehicle and to see the organization of art, the institutions that hold art high up there, as just any other business, as you will find in the market. I think new capital flowing in will actually boost the, sort of the art market. The other part to it, apart from private capital coming in, would have to be government support. Now, I don't have data, but knowing what I know now and knowing what I knew some 30, 40 years ago, in this market, there was a lot more government support. There was a lot more institutional support for the art than there is today. And that is why I think art has also been able to grow. So while that support isn't there, a lot of the new players are actually forging ahead and creating some value, good value, without government support. Sometimes government support actually holds you back. Sometimes it elevates you. But in essence, what I'm saying is that this market has actually developed a peculiar non-governmental support, private sector-led growth model that we have seen in the last few years. The banks, I've seen 1 or 2 banks that are actually marketing their products, maybe art financing, but this is nowhere near, what one should be talking about. But at least the market has started, and I think as the market grows, we will see other things that would improve the quantum.
Okay, so we've been talking a lot about the markets, the sectors, and I think it's important to bring it home to the artists. Aside from, I believe, people over objects, for me personally, right? So what artists and art practitioners and cultural operators around in Africa and Nigeria, what are they doing wrong financially? In the consideration of the art space and the financial state of the artist and the art practitioner, what exactly are they doing wrong?
I don't think artists are. I'm not sure that artists are the best managers of money. Financial fortunes are driven by a conscious effort to actually manage your money properly. I don't know that artists are the best managers of such. That's number one. Number two, the way you conduct yourself in the market actually does matter to your fortune. You may find that a lot more people who are being represented by galleries, rather than representing themselves, are doing better at this. Not because artists don't want representation, but perhaps because there just isn't that much number, that many people who are set up to manage the artists. I think that's a major problem there. And one cannot really expect much in that market. I think the market is growing, but it is growing organically. I think the fact that the economy hasn't been that buoyant in the last 5 years has also sort of reduced the quantum of the growth that we could have seen, or rather that we saw, up until 5 years ago. I don't know if that answers your question, but I don't know that artists would be able to manage themselves better if there were not, if the professionals didn't exist in the market who are equipped to do that sort of management.
Interesting. So this professional, basically this industry, also this creative industry, there's also the question of control, because from my conversation with a number of artists, there's always this concern of who runs the market, like who controls the market. Is it a free market? Is it a monopolized market? Because there is, like you said, there is the artist managing the money, and then there is the artist being able to present themselves. But if we feel like it's stacked against the artist, then what really does the artist have to do? So how free or monopolized, or like who basically is controlling the art and the creative industries, and how can that be improved?
Well, first of all, I don't know that even in Europe or America, you don't have, established what you may choose to call monopolies or other influencers. I don't think anybody monopolizes this market, honestly. What you will have are very, very influential people, okay, in the market, who are either galleries or art dealers. But I think this market is still too tiny. It's still too young for anybody to claim or for anybody to see much dominance. Artists are always free. New dealers, new galleries are coming up on a daily basis. And old dealers would rightly not necessarily want to carry the entire market, not want to, sort of represent everybody in the market. So I don't know about monopoly, but I do know about influence. And to what extent can they really control the market may actually be overrated. Some of the practitioners who used to reign, who used to, sort of dominate the market some 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, are actually losing their influence to players in the London market. Okay, that dominance isn't there anymore, and I do believe that anyone who sets out and has a proper business plan to create an art organization can actually do so in this market today. You just need capital, new flows of capital to come in. The economy hasn't been that fantastic, so the number of people who are willing to invest to create those institutions are not there. Government really is out. The art participation by government is out. You don't see many. You don't even see the quality of art administrators that we used to see some 20, 30 years ago anymore.
Wow. Okay, so shifting back a bit to this practice, so nothing the question of that we used to see could also be based on interest in the field. The conversation I often have with friends is about how it seems everyone in the Nigerian art space and some other African art space are create.
I can hardly hear you.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me clear now?
Okay, yes, that's better.
All right. So in there has been like a certain drive to either be.
I'm sorry, Innocent. I'm not sure, but please continue.
Right. So you're talking about how in recent times it seems like everyone just wants to be either an artist or a curator, thereby leaving a large gap in the market, in the art industry, of being an administrator, being a consultant, and all of these things. And this mostly could also be attributed to some people losing faith in there being like structures that can empower them within this industry. So they're going to other things or doing much more flamboyant, which makes me wonder, like, what structures, what facilities, and what systems exist within the finance sector as practitioners and creatives can leverage or can implement in order to achieve a certain level of financial freedom. Like, what are the things we can do? Are there ways in which we can go into the loan market? Are there ways in which we can go into the investment market? Like, what are these structures that exist that already exist actually, or if they do, that we can leverage for financial freedom?
I think the point I'm trying to make is this. You see, and I think you and I have had this discussion earlier on and all that. The point is, finance will come into a well-organized, a well-oiled market. Right now, it's improving. It's much bigger than it used to be, but I don't know that the quantum of monies swirling around in the art industry is enough to bring in outside players, okay, especially in the loan market. A few people have come in, they have been able to raise money, and they have been able to set up proper institutions. Let me give a couple of examples. If you know the Signature Gallery here in Lagos, Signature has been able to sustain itself for over 30 years, okay, with proper capital. Rayleigh Gallery didn't exist in this market some 6-7 years ago, okay. Art House is something that, if I remember, started in 2008. Now, these are few and far in between, but here's the issue. These institutions have actually run themselves with a lot of passion and a lot of professionalism, okay? So even before you find the capital, you still have to run a tight ship. You still have to run a coherent business as an art institution. And we need to see a lot more of those in order for this market to create the value for everybody that we need. If there isn't a proper gallery system or a proper art representation system, then the artists may not really feel the impact of growth because the market will still be scattered, okay, and disorganized. The artists may not be able to find their levels. They may not be able to find their prices. So basically what I'm trying to say is that while we may think that, yes, we need a lot of capital, we need financial institutions to come in, I don't know that they will come into a market which is still not as well organized as they would, you know, in Europe or America, for example. Innocent?
Yes, I'm with you. Yeah. Yeah, that's.
I'm sure this is not what. Yeah, I'm sure I haven't specifically, but yeah.
Yeah, I think I understand what you're saying. I mean, we have to clean up our home. You have to tend to your garden before you start planting in it, right? Before you put seed in the ground, you have to first, make sure the garden is neat. In a sense, yeah, that's I think I understand. So we have our own homework to do in that regard. But taking it away from conversations around institutional and structures and systems, what can the art practitioners and artists individually do to improve their earnings within the arts and or diversify their earnings beyond the arts, as the case may be?
I think a lot. I think in general, the artists who have been tied to proper representation, or the more mature artists who have actually learned, have actually done better when it comes to maintaining their prices or even raising their their prices. I think this is a matter of proper organization and proper representation. If an artist produces work and 1 minute sells to collector A at $5,000 and the next minute reduces that price to $2,000, he's going to find, a proper sustainable market, price for himself, because word gets round and people talk. Okay, that's number one. However, if he's able to maintain his price, even if he's doing private sales on his own, if he's able to maintain his price as just one price for one specific type of work, the market will know, it will get round to the market, and the market will note that. And this is how you start raising your fortunes. If you can't do that, then, hey, that's number one. On the part of the gallery owners, if you are representing your artists and you are not faithful in the way you deal with them, you don't pay them on time, okay? Or you sell at different markets, different prices to different people, or you don't even, give them, pay proper commissions, or rather, sort of pay over whatever you've made to the artists, word is going to get round to the market and you are going to be blacklisted. It's just as simple as that. Keeping faith with your contracts and ensuring that you don't, I hate to use the word, but it's commonly used here, prostitute yourselves all over the market. And that's a common problem in this market as well.
So what about beyond the arts? How can artists and art practitioners diversify? Beyond the arts, how can diversify their earnings? Beyond the arts.
Beyond the arts, how can
art artists diversify their earnings?
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Well, I think just like anybody else, so take for example, if you make money, you need to invest, right? Investment advice, I also have to say, is few and far in between, because the market in this country for the private sector, for the private market, private banking, is actually quite limited. A lot of artists that I have seen over the years, and I hate to use this example. So one artist has a successful exhibition, okay? And as they commonly say, it was sold out. Rather than put some money into a sizable portion of that money into a proper investment, the artist goes and buys a brand new car. Okay, that car is going to depreciate in future because you don't earn a regular income. You may not be able to, even if you decide to sell that car, you may not be able to get the value that you put into it. However, if you have put your money into some form of investment, even if it's a savings account, you may still be able to reap something from it. And in Nigeria, just like in a large part of Africa, if you had been able to put that money into an investment in, real estate, you may actually not just be earning an income from rent, you may also be actually earning money from capital appreciation. But as I said, a lot of this advice isn't common, isn't readily available. And this is where your point is quite relevant. What products can the financial markets bring to bear in order to help the artists? We don't have that now. And a lot of the artists that I support, that I actually mentor, I do tell them this all the time, and I help them to look for investment products that would sustain them when they're not earning. Because art is discretionary, and you may sell today, but you may not be able to sell much for the next 2-3 months.
Okay. Thanks for that. So I think my last question before we maybe start taking questions for the audience is, like you said, it's the advice with regards to how to get into this into investments and everything is far in between. It's not regular and it's not honest. And I know I shared some examples with you or some conversations around people who went in to invest in some funds, some stuff because they were promised a certain amount of returns, right? So when generally the conversation around investment comes up, there is almost like two categories of people. There are those who are like, yeah, you must invest, put your money into it. And then there are those who are so skeptical that they rather put their money under the mattress and sleep on it rather than invest it in anything because they keep on hearing the sad stories of people whose money is, just poofed into the air. So, and now I know this question applies to people generally, but because our concern is with the art practitioners, how exactly can art practitioners protect themselves while getting into their investment? Like, how can they protect their interest while getting into investment? Like, aside from, like you mentioned, you mentioned that the real estate markets. What other markets are favorable to them that they should consider going into?
Well, if you had the equivalent of $1,000 about a year and a half ago, let's say you had 360,000 naira, which is what $1,000 was equivalent to some 1.5, 2 years ago. If you had put that 360,000 in dollars, it would be worth 520 or thereabouts today, or 510. The point is that in a market where the currency depreciates very fast, the first thing to notice to not do is to keep your money in that currency. A lot of people who have kept their money in naira have actually lost out in the last few years. So keeping it under the bed isn't the safest. Maybe if you are able to keep dollars under the bed, you might have made some money. That's number one. Number two is, yes, there are quite a few dodgy investments out there. And I'll be the first to admit that retail type investment advice is virtually non-existent in this market. So you may not find that person, that advisor, to tell you, hey, put it here or don't keep it there. But the safest bet, if you decide to keep your money in naira, may have been government instruments. So government treasuries, government bonds. That's number two. Number three, if you do have good money to put into real estate, approach a lawyer to look into it for you and make sure that he gives you a better, or rather make sure that this is somebody who is trusted and understands that investment properly. And that you're not just buying some non-existent piece of land somewhere. But I think if you asked me, what would I have done if I knew the future about a year or 2 years ago, I'd have put my money in dollar. I'm not saying people should do that. Okay, I'm not saying anybody should do that. It's up to you what you invest your money in, but this is what I would have done knowing what I know now. Or keep your money in bank instruments, savings accounts, even if it's a dollar savings account. That's what I would have done. Innocent? You seem to have disappeared from the.
Yeah, sorry, I'm with you. I'm with you. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Yeah, so I got that. Thanks so much for that. So say if you want to put money under your mattress, make sure it's dollars. If not, there is no point.
Or pounds.
Or pounds. Yeah. If you want to put your money under the mattress, just make sure it's dollars or pounds. Thank you so much for that. So I think at this moment we could just, if there are questions from anyone in the audience, would gladly take them. Just you could, show your hands. I don't know, Saizo would help us moderate that. You could just show your hands, or you could put your questions in the chat there.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Hakeem. There's just so many gems that you were dropping there. I was making lots of notes. I feel like I've been to school. Definitely a lot there to learn. As myself, I mean, I mainly work within kind of like the public arts and kind of government kind of led projects and initiatives, or public money, stuff that's funded by public money. So I don't really work too much in the commercial and private side of things. However, it's really really useful and interesting for me to kind of learn about that. Should I kind of take, should I, end up kind of venturing into the private sector and the commercial sector as well, which I've kind of dipped into a little bit over the years. And of course, it is very challenging as well. It's not easy. And so I think you kind of speaking about, people who, having people, within these galleries and these organizations that do specialize, in certain areas, in terms of kind of data and strategy. You see that it is very full on like a business. And I think something that you mentioned at the beginning, you spoke about, people considering the art industry, or people looking at the art, the art sector in the industry in the same way as other major industries, such as oil and gas and food and beverage industry, because it's, like you say, it's a $60 billion industry. I think when we consider that, and when we look into these, look into it as a major industry and a major player, I think it's then that people like myself, or others may then see that, okay, this is a proper industry. There needs to be people who specialize in this, that, and that, where data and strategy and all of these things become really important components to creating a successful relationship between artists and buyers and collectors, and kind of keeping in a very healthy economy within the sector. So there's definitely a lot that I learned from there. So thank you so much again for that. I wanted to elaborate, or I wanted to, if you could, elaborate a little bit on something that you spoke about. You spoke about kind of government participation and how private galleries have been able to thrive, without, they've been able to thrive more without that government support. They've been able to be more innovative. So it's two questions really. One of them is, why do you think that is? I know it might seem like a silly question to ask because there may be an obvious answer coming. But the second question as well is that, would you say this is an African or not specifically Nigerian thing, or would you say this is something that's happening on a global scale?
Thanks. So now I think this government thing. I started my collection many years ago, and in those days, you had a smattering of small galleries, but then you had the institutions. You had the National Gallery of Art, you had the Art Ministry, you had the museum system, okay? All of those have almost died, okay? I think the museums are only paying salaries. I'm not sure how many programs they're running. Okay, the government museums I meant, by the way. You had, going back to when I was a student, there used to be government-sponsored art education programs, okay? I don't know how many young people are on today. As far back as 10 years ago, I'm not sure if those things are going around to the schools, okay? In those days, the National Gallery of Art used to commission works by the Enwowus of this world, by the Grillos of this world, okay, by the OKKs in those days. The last time, and everybody will tell you this story, the last time I went to the National Gallery of Art, I think about 15 years ago, a lot of those works have been reigned over. There isn't much of a maintenance system because the budgets simply have not been provided for them or have been diverted. Okay, about 2 years ago, I was approached by the National Museum to partner with them in some form of documentation process, and I got my company to commit to buying some equipment. You may find that that system, the museum system, has actually depreciated to the point where all that these guys get today are just salaries, not anything to do with different programs, art programs. Okay? That's what I mean. Government is out in the sense that government really isn't supporting, at least you don't see it. You do see the Minister of Culture attending the odd art event, but I don't know many forms of constructive support that the government gives to the art industry. But what you now find is that that smattering of museums that we used to see some 30, 40 years ago in Lagos have become a whole lot of small operators who are holding the art market up. Okay? Now, if you ask me, that is quite similar to what you may have heard about the music industry. So, government used to be quite big in that many, many years ago in the 70s when we were growing up. But now they're non-existent. Yet, that industry and Nollywood are literally multi-billion-dollar industries which have been grown and propped up by the private sector. So when somebody asked me the other day, do you think government will still be relevant? I don't know that government will be relevant in today's market, okay? Because you don't even have the talent system in the government art administration. Who is a curator in the National Theatre, the National Gallery today? Okay, how much training? So if you bring me the best curator, how many of them have been replicated in the system? Who can then go forth and multiply the art market? It can only be in the private sector, the way Nigeria is right now. And a large part of that problem has been that we haven't really funded the industry. The government hasn't really funded. And you'll also find that the Nigerian state, or even the Ghanaian state, or even the African states, their sources of finance have actually been cut. The fortunes of these countries, including Nigeria, are not the best, are not what they used to be. So they cannot afford an art program. Does that answer your question?
Yes, yeah, it does. Yeah, and just kind of on the second question that I had, is this something in terms of the global art market? Would you say that this is a trend or a pattern that's also happening within the global art market as well, in terms of public institutions not having the don't know what the word would be, but not having all of the resources that they had before in order to nurture artists?
Yeah. So let me give you what I know about. I started following a lot of the British, these guys, Damien Hirst and all that. We were all students at some point or the other in England in those days. I started noticing these guys many years ago. There used to be proper institutions in the UK. Okay. Then the Mrs. Thatcher government started, you could say out of necessity, started, I don't want to say defunding the institutions, but the budgets of these art institutions started coming down. However, what I did notice, even after I left the UK as a student, is that you guys had the national lottery system, which came in and started filling a lot of the gaps that have been left by government. So programs could continue, programs could actually improve. But then you also had something, sponsorship, okay, of the different programs in the museum system started rising because corporates started seeing the importance of this. If you go to South Africa, a lot of the funding of the arts in general, music, visual art, theater art, and all that, a lot of that, the funding for those industries have actually come from the private sector, the banks, and some of these institutions who do all this, who sponsor all this music shows, theaters and all that. We've had very limited success raising funding in Nigeria for the art from the private sector. Okay, so what you are left with are these hardy practitioners, the people's heroes who go about in a crude way promoting the art industry. Okay, it's not organized, but hey, look where we are today. Nigeria is recognized. Ghana is recognized. South Africa has gained a lot more importance. Okay, I'm not saying this is the ideal, but in the absence of government, we'd better look inward and grow that market. Okay, some of us go out there today, and the little amounts that we have, we do a lot of patronage with such. We bring friends along. We've just opened a large art residency outside of Lagos with private money, and hopefully this will turn into something. But what I'm trying to say is that in the absence of government, all needn't be lost. The private sector can step in, but then there also has to be money for the practitioners.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that, Hakeem. Really, really helpful. Yeah. And Louise has just mentioned in the chat, very good point about the National Lottery impact on supporting the arts. Yeah, I definitely agree with Louise. We have the what we have in the UK, for those who don't know, NPOs, which stand for National Portfolio Organisations, which is supported by the Arts Council. And then we also have which a lot of the publicly funded arts activity in the UK has massive backing and support from the National Lottery as well. But yeah, thank you so much for that, Hakeem. So we have a question from YouTube, which is, what are your thoughts on digitizing collections to preserve recent works and make them accessible? And how can artists still monetize on this?
Well, if I understand that question, I mean, when you talk about digitizing, we're talking about just keeping them in digital formats, taking pictures and keeping them as soft copies, essentially.
Yeah, digitizing collections to preserve recent works. Yeah, making them accessible, and how can artists still monetize on that? So yeah.
Sure. The most basic form of digitization, or rather monetizing your digital collection, is turning them into prints. Okay. I think what you could have, I mean, so when I started collecting, I started buying. There used to be this ubiquitous shops on the streets in London in those days, in my student days. I've forgotten what they're called now. And you bought prints, £10 prints. A lot of the works that we started collecting with, and collecting in 1985, 86, were works by Picasso, Gauguin, and all of these guys. And yes, those guys were not alive, but I'm sure their estates are making a fair amount of money just selling their prints, for example. And of course, before a print can be popular, before a print can sell, it has to be quite popular. Somebody needs to have written it needs to be quite popular as whatever. That's the most obvious form. A lot of, well, of course, you also have postcards and whatever, okay? I have noticed something. Artworks they don't just wake up one day and become popular. It's because somebody has promoted them. Somebody has written something. There's a story behind that artwork. How about getting your artwork known? How about getting your artwork to be meaningful? Okay, that way you can actually sell. There's a whole industry behind the marketing of art. And we're not talking about marketing of the original artwork, but the copies that are made from it. I think that's the most obvious response I can give to that.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. Thank you, Hakeem. And just thinking about what you said about, the estates of artists still being able to monetize. I was having a conversation actually with a fellow curator who had bought a new pair of shoes that had a Keith Haring design on them, and he was like, oh wow, like how did this, and we were even having this conversation about whether artists like Haring and Basquiat, whose works have been commercialized within the fashion industry and other industries, whether that's something that they would be down with if they were still alive or would agree to. But I suppose their estates are still making the money, and being able to go into a high street shop and buy something with a design. I mean, even for me, I'm not at the level where I can afford to buy all the art that I would like to buy, but I do have a pair of shoes that were like a special edition of one of my favorite artists. They did a run of their signature print on the shoes. I think things like t-shirts, but I know some people might see it as selling out as such, but I think there's lots of creative ways I think that artists can expand their work. And I think also with that consideration of, even just making it accessible, because not everyone, I suppose, can afford an original painting, but even something like being able to wear the art on a t-shirt or a pair of shoes, or like you say, postcards and that sort of thing, and it can be a limited edition run, so you kind of keep it special in that way. I think that works quite well. Something I really liked when I was in Lagos a couple of years ago, there was an exhibition on exhibition posters. People were, and it was kind of giving a different perspective into exhibition posters and how they themselves are a work of art. And actually remember a few years ago, I'm going off on a tangent, a few years ago, I went to the Basquiat exhibition at the Barbican, and I purchased a poster from the gift shop of the exhibition for £5. Just over a year later, people were selling that poster on eBay for, close to £200, I think. And this is a poster for that you could easily access. So I think there are different ways in that. I think this was a bit different because it was the gallery that initially profited from the poster, but then people as collectors or visitors were being able to make a profit from that. So I think there's lots of different ways, really, like lots of in which artists can get their work out. And also just thinking about the behaviors of audiences, I think is something that artists should really look into, that the behaviors and looking at what consumers want in terms of art, people who have different I suppose price points and different incomes as well. So so thank you so much for sharing some of that. So we have so here on Zoom we have Nyancho or Nyanko. I do apologize. Nyancho. Sorry, I do apologize for that. So Nyancho is just going to unmute and ask a few questions.
Okay, thank you, Sasiso, and thank you to all the organizers, first of all, for putting together these sessions. They've been really, really helpful. I have a few questions for Mr. Adedeji. First of all, thank you for all the insights you shared in this session as well.
Make it one question at a time. You
mentioned about representation, because I know, yes, okay, we can do that. The first question is about representation. So I remember attending like a Nigerian artist a few years ago, and someone asked about representation, and he mentioned that he chose not to be represented, but I can't remember exactly how he put it, but long story short was basically him saying it will make you look a bit snobbish or so in the industry or to the art world. But recently I've been thinking about it because what you said, I've seen it play out. Like I've seen a lot of artists doing a lot better who are represented by galleries or agencies. But coming from your area of expertise as a collector, being in the art world, and also from the financial side, are there any things you would say to look out for an artist to look out for when seeking representation? Any red flags or any good signs to look out for?
Okay. So let me just, so when I talk about my work as a patron, I tend to, so I can tell you that I have a lot of artist friends, both young and old, who actually seek my advice about representation. And in the last, I would say in the last 3 months, I have advised perhaps about 5 or 6 artists on their representation, including, most especially including helping them to review their contracts. I think what you will find with representation, at least in this market, and it's not new here, it's not peculiar to Nigeria. A lot of people who want to represent you would want to get the upper hand. They'd want to have the better financial incentive. So somebody says to you, okay, I'm going to represent you. I'm going to charge you 50%, okay, of your prices. Okay, no problem. If that's what is, if that's what obtains outside, no problem. If that's what obtains in this market, no problem. As long as you can get me a sustainable price. But at the same time, look at it this way. I, the artist, am the real investor in this process. I've gone out and bought colors. I've bought canvas. I've stretched the work. I have also put in the time. And then I've given you these artworks to sell. If you don't sell, you don't have any disadvantage. You just give me back, you just give the works back to me at the end of 1 or 2 years. That means apart from my money, I've also wasted 2 years. Okay, why don't you give me some form of sustenance money? Okay, between the time that you have the artworks and the time that you sell. A lot of people, a lot of the dealers don't offer that for different reasons, which are understandable. So what I tend to tell the artists is that why don't you ask for some commitment on the part of the gallery, of whoever wants to represent you. So that's one major thing that I think people should look out for. You also should look out for exclusivity or not. If somebody isn't willing to invest in you, then why do you want to give them exclusivity? Okay. Then I know 1 or 2 artists, they're budding artists, they are being represented. And some of them, 1 or 2 of them actually chose to determine who their works go into. And that's another level of art practice. Okay, so those sort of things, those sort of conditions, you should be brave enough, you should be willing to put your own terms in it. But one thing that is quite critical to an artist is that if I'm giving you exclusivity and you're not giving me money in return, how the hell am I supposed to sustain myself? How the hell am I supposed to create works? If you don't get that, then, hey, think twice, okay?
All right, thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. The next question I had was about, I want to know if you have any thoughts on NFTs. Like, I've seen a rising number of people going into NFT.
Honestly, I'd be quite honest with you. I wouldn't say that I'm the world's greatest expert on NFTs, but from what I have seen, I'm hoping that it is not another gimmick because we're all bored sitting at home. Okay, I'm hoping it isn't. But if it is, if it does move on to whatever, to greater heights, then good. But I'm not sure that I have a full understanding of the financial justification for the prices that I have seen in recent times on NFTs.
Oh, okay.
But then I'm very conservative. Please don't take my word.
Okay. Okay. My next question is not directly related to finance, but you have mentioned a couple of times about the residency program, which are you able to share with us a bit more about that, and also possibly share how one can get involved?
Okay. I mean, I can pass the details on to Innocent at some point, but basically, and you can actually see this. We have a little teaser on IG. It's called, I think it's called K-Air or Kobomoje, Kobomoje, artist in residence. And basically, it's a large property belonging to my family, which I have decided would be best used as a form of as a residency. We don't have many residencies in Nigeria. I don't know of any other residency apart from one or two in Lagos, one run by Art House. I believe Peju Alatishe also has one, but that's just too, that's just too little a number for a country with so many artists and a country that is a focal center for the arts in Africa. Okay, so we set this up, and we've got a couple of professors, a couple of professional people who are helping us actualize it. We've just hired a director, Jumoke Sanwo, whom some of you may know, has been working with me from the start, from scratch, from about 3 years ago to actualize it. We think we're there. And we have a couple of people who may be well known in the market as advisory board members, Professor Peju Olaiwola and Mr. Oluwamoda, the sculptor, are helping us to get this done. I think we will launch our program, that first program, in the next few months. That's all I can say about it, but please just check it out, and you'll also be hearing many more stories. If you want, I'll pass some pictures on to Innocent, just to show you. It's an architectural masterpiece. It's a very old building, that belongs to my family, and we've tried as much as possible to give back to the art community in that sense. And of course, it's also funded by us, at least for now.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think it's a great initiative, because even aside from private properties laying fallow, there's a lot of government buildings and other places like the Independence Building where the biennial was held, Lagos Biennial was held the last time, and they're not being put to good use. So it's really good to see this initiative come up.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you.
Such architecture.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. My last question is basically me shooting my shot. We have a lot of mentors in the art world, older, more experienced artists whom you share ideas with. You talk about your processes, your work. I never knew there was someone that could advise artists on the financial side. So,
oh, here's a shocker for you. I actually get involved.
Shooting my shot, how can I become one of your mentees? It's not an opportunity I'm willing to pass up. You've mentioned that you mentor already, so please.
No, I mean, hey, look, I'm pretty available. I'll tell you what. Something that is a weakness for me is that I can't stay off art. As Innocent had introduced me, I'm actually an exhibiting photographer, which is my own way of actualizing whatever creativity I have, which is very little and which clearly doesn't compare to a professional photographer or an artist. But I can't stay off art and I can't stay off artists. And look, let's talk. If there's anything that you want to ask, I will always give it. I'll always give my opinion. And the only problem I have, and Innocent will tell you, is that I'm quite blunt. And
that's perfect for me. I enjoy blunt.
Okay. All right.
Some of us like to surround ourselves with blunt people. Yeah. So some of the people I listen to the most are blunt people. Like they will tell you as it is in their mind, and it's important. I think it's important for the growth of something like art, because there's a lot of talk about relative, how things are relative and whatever. But I think it's quite important that in that space for someone to grow, to also have someone that is telling them as it is and not sugarcoating things, in a sense. And yeah, that's very much appreciated.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Thank you very much, Mr. Adedeji. I'll be in touch.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
So we have time for maybe one or two more questions. For those who are on Zoom, do raise your hand or unmute yourself if you do have a question. And those viewing on YouTube, do feel free to ask away in the comments if you do have any more questions for Hakeem. But if not, we are only a couple of minutes or so away from the end of the event, so we can round up. If you do prefer to ask your question in the chat, then do feel free to do so. You don't have to ask verbally, we can ask on your behalf. And it looks like that might be it for questions, actually. So we're pretty much on time for this event. So thank you so much for just sharing your knowledge and wisdom with us, Hakeem. I don't know about everyone else, I'm sure it's the same for everyone else, but I've really enjoyed this event a lot. I've learned a lot. There's definitely a lot to digest, a lot to think about as well. So thank you so much. We really appreciate it as well. I would just like to say a massive thank you again to Format, Festival and Quad for supporting this event as well, and of course to everyone who has attended this event today, those who are attending the event on Zoom, and those who have been attending the event on YouTube as well. As with all of our events, this event has been recorded and streamed live and will be available for people to watch back on YouTube. So do feel free to share the link with your friends if you found this, or acquaintances, colleagues, if you found this event useful. As I mentioned at the beginning, this is the second event of a 5-part series. So we'll be hosting a live event every Tuesday up until the 24th of August. And our next event will be next week on the 10th of August, which is Hacking the Art Market. So it's kind of like a continuation of today's event. And that event will be with Freda Isingoma of Kisa Art. Freda is a entrepreneur and ex-investment banking professional who has worked in multinational and leading investment institutions in the UK, US and South Africa. And she has 20 years experience in establishing successful business initiatives. Freda is passionate about art and has been collecting contemporary African and diaspora art for 20 years. And in 2018, she founded KISA, which provides innovative investment fund and impact solutions that drive growth, visibility, knowledge, and sustainability of the contemporary African and diaspora art market. Frida is also a member of the Zimbabwe Pavilion Advisory Committee for the upcoming Venice Biennale in 2022. So we'll be really excited to welcome Frida with us next week. And we hope to welcome all of you back with us next week as well for a continuation of this series. But yes, thank you so much again for everyone for attending today. We look forward to seeing you for the rest of the series. And all I have to say now is thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your afternoon as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, bye. And thank you, Innocent.
Bye.
Thank you for
thank you everyone. Thank you,
Have a good day.
thoughtful conversation as well.
All right. See you guys. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.